Good morning, I'm Mandy Wheeler and I'm joined today by the former KwaZulu-Natal Hawks General Johan Booysen, who of course you would have heard the story about what's been happening in the Sunday Times yesterday. If you read it, there was an op-ed by the editor essentially apologising for the Cato Manor death squad stories and saying that the journalists involved would be handing back their awards and also the money. Also an op-ed from General Johan Booysen about the entire debacle and the impact that it has had on him. Thank you for coming in today. So for those of who may be watching who didn't see the Sunday Times and may not have read what you wrote, essentially what have you said about this entire story that's happened to you?
Well, Mandy, I need to start off by acknowledging the courage that Bongani Siqoko had, the current editor of the Sunday Times, to make amends and to acknowledge that they had made mistakes in the past. It's just a pity that the editor at the time, Roy Hartley, hasn't had the same courage to come forward and tell us what role he played at the time in preventing this sordid saga. I knew all along that the narrative that Hofstadter and Africa had been running were rubbish. Although I gave them objective points where they could go and verify certain facts, because they had a version and I had different versions. For instance, they would allege that I was in a police helicopter directing an operation, whereas I was sitting in my office in Durban. And I told them, look, go to the police's air wing, interview the pilot and the crew, and look at the logbook of the helicopter, and then you'll realize that I only arrived after about 90 minutes. They chose not to do that. I told them the photographs that you are flashing around, that not all of those people had been shot by Cato Manor, and despite that, alerting them to that, they nevertheless took the most gruesome picture where 5 people were shot dead on the back of a LDV, and published that and intimated that Cato Manor had killed those people. So my article was just to reflect on what happened and to give some perspective as to how I tried to get the truth out there, but in spite of my efforts, Africa and Hofstadter clearly made up their mind what they were going to write.
So with the benefit of hindsight now, do you believe that the Cato Manor narrative that came out, do you believe that it was a malicious campaign, a planted story, or do you think it was just negligence on the part of journalists? How deep does it go? Do you think that there was a plot to discredit you?
I've got no doubt, and I think it's actually been proven now, that there was a plot to neutralise myself, and Cato Manor were basically collateral damage. When they couldn't find anything against me, they basically conjured up all these cases, linked them together, and said, okay, well, we've got a criminal enterprise now we need to find a manager. And I happened to be the chosen manager, although I was never the direct commander. The direct commander was Colonel Rajan Iyer, who was subsequently arrested for perjury, by the way, and who's been dismissed from the police. So the whole narrative that they were running, I think, has now been exposed. I'm in possession of a document, to answer your question, where Advocate Anthony Mosing from the National Prosecuting Authority, and I'm prepared to make that available when I eventually go and testify at the State Capture Commission of Inquiry, where the police minister at the time, Nathi Mthethwa, on a meeting on the 8th of March 2012, he had a meeting with prosecutors, which I find strange to start off with. Why would the police minister meet with prosecutors? Now, the prosecutors present there were inter alia Gladstone Mahema, Selo Mahema, Raymond Matenjwa, Anthony Mosing, and a few others. Now, the reason why I mention these names, invariably these names appear when people like Linus Breitenbach, Robert McBride, Shadrick Sabia, and Pravin Gordhan, well, Tori Pretorius was involved there as well, and even in our matter. These same prosecutors seem to be involved in all these prosecutions, and I find that very strange. And those are the same prosecutors that Natim Tetwa had a meeting with in March 2012. Now, at the time, there was the slush fund investigation, the looting of the slush fund. And we all know now that Natim Tetwa benefited from the slush fund. They built a wall around his house, his proud residence of 190,000 rand. Linked with that, obviously Richard Ndluli and a few other police generals. So that's the one aspect. Then on the different aspect, we were busy investigating the Tosham Pandey, and obviously we established the Tosham Pandey. I mean, Edward Zuma actually came to my office requesting me to release money that I'd frozen 15 million rand, and I refused. So there were a number of investigations against very prominent people, and at the time there was also the Amigos case. Now, although I did not manage the Amigo case from its inception, I inherited that investigation, and the Advocate Superior Malocha, who was the DPP then in KZN, refused to withdraw charges against Mike Mabukulu, who was the MSC at the time, and Peggy Ngoyeni. And at the same time refused to sign my indictment, and the Cato Manor's indictment. And for his sins, he was sidelined and replaced by Moipone Noko. So you had all these protagonists with their own agendas banding together, and if you see the role players within the Hawks, Jan Mabula and Nkobo Jiba, both of them were instrumental in the arrest of Gerrie Nel when he prosecuted Jackie Selebi. And now with this matter, and we all know the links with Richard Ndluli and Jan Mabula and with Juba.
And of course, this was a period over the last few years where we saw law enforcement agencies essentially being captured and then being eviscerated. And the damage that was wrought on the NPA and Hawks and IPID by the Cato Manor Death Squad story in particular, but also the Zimbabwean renditions and the SARS rogue unit. What was the damage that was done as a result of the stories that were published in the Sunday Times?
On a personal level, huge. I mean, I've had an unblemished career for 35 years, having received international awards from Interpol, from national commissions, from provincial commissions, and all of a sudden, this gets sprung onto you. So it's had a huge effect on my career. Obviously, I was arrested twice, I was suspended twice. I'm still dealing with those issues. On my family, it had a huge impact on my family. But not forgetting the Cato Manor members. Sorry about that. I thought I'd switch that off.
He's a popular man, obviously. I'm sure it's the media phoning you to get comment from you. You're the man at the moment.
Yeah, it's actually on flight mode. Sorry about that.
So obviously the impact on you personally, and then also on the agencies themselves. We've seen a lot of good people like you leading these various organizations.
Well, if you look at SARS, I mean, we all now know what's happened there, and the damage it's caused for inland revenue. You look at what's happened at the Hawks, with Burning and Clemenza basically destroying the Hawks. Well, not basically, he did destroy the Hawks, and I don't envy the new head, General Abia, and whom I have a lot of faith, but I think he's got his work cut out for him. Look at people like Ahmad Ramat and Shadrach Sabia. I mean, their lives have basically been destroyed. Looking at the institutions, they've appointed a new head at the Hawks. They've appointed, well, we have an acting guy at SARS now. We've had the removal of Sean Abrams. But I don't think Sean Abrams was ever the head of the NPA. Although he was the appointed de jure head of the NPA, Nonkobo Jiba was the de facto head of the NPA. She ran the show, and as we speak, I know they are still busy concocting stories and trying to compromise me, but I'm ready for them.
So what is the current state of these organizations? You speak about the leadership. Do you think that there is still an element of that cabal that exists today? that are still present in the NPA? You know, how influential do you think Richard Mdluli still is over crime intelligence, and how worried should we be about that?
Well, we know Richard Mdluli's links with Nkobo Jiba. I mean, we just need to go back to when she was suspended at the time when she was implicated in the arrest of Gerry Nel. And the person who came to her aid at the time was none other than Richard Mdluli. He made a statement in her favour. So it's clear that that link has been established. And I can assure you, I speak to a lot of prosecutors, and I still engage with a number of them. Nkobo Jiba is still running the show behind the scenes with that little cabal clique of hers at the National Prosecuting Authority.
And crime intelligence and the Hawks?
Well, they've appointed General Godfrey Labia as the new head of the Hawks. I think he's busy cleaning up the Hawks. It's going to take a long time. You must understand that Bernie and Tlametsa replaced every single provincial head in the country, bar one, and she's also left on her own accord. So I'm happy that with the Hawks that there are moves afoot to clean them up. SARS, I think we'll have to wait to see what's going to come out in this commission of inquiry that's ongoing now. With regards to the NPA, I would hope that the president would appoint, well, there's basically a month left, that an appointment is going to be made so that there can be some stability. But in spite of a new person that's going to be appointed at the NPA, I still believe that there should be an investigation, be it through commission of inquiry or an investigation of some sort, as to the independence and the workings of the National Prosecuting Authority.
Do you think there's been enough accountability from, we see the Sunday Times now taking accountability, do you think there's been enough accountability from the police and from the Hawks about these narratives that were quite clearly planted, about the Zim renditions, about Cato Manor, about the SARS rogue units? You know, what would you like to see happen?
It's very difficult at this late stage because all the damage has been done. At least the Sunday Times' new editor has had the courage to come forward and openly admit that they've made mistakes. The prosecuting authority, they should go back. As we speak, I mean, the case against me had already been thrown out by a judge in the High Court. And in spite of that, Abrams, and if I say Abrams, Reed, Jiba, had my prosecution reauthorized. What I would like to see is a complete clean-up at the National Prosecuting Authority. If I say we, I mean the citizens of this country is not out of the woods with that cabal remaining within the National Prosecuting Authority.
Are you sufficient with what the Sunday Times has done? Are you sufficiently happy with that? Because there's been quite a bit of response to the article yesterday. Some people saying that they would like to see more being done. You've mentioned the fact that Ray Hartley hasn't accounted for it. You know, are you satisfied that enough action has been taken against Hofstadter and Africa?
I don't think the current leadership can do more than they've done. I mean, they've basically apologized. They've acknowledged they've acknowledged mistakes that weren't made under their watch. The two journalists have parted ways with the Sunday Times, so I don't think there's anything more that the current leadership. Well, that's my personal view. I think. Well, I've heard that there are people with different views, but I'm satisfied with the current leadership, with what they have done to. There's also this debate that they should reveal their sources.
Do you think they should?
Well, I've done it for them. They don't have to. I can tell you now, it's crime intelligence.
And do you know specifically who it was at crime intelligence?
Well, Susan Smuts from the Sunday Times, in a letter to the Ombudsman, when I reported them to the Ombudsman, acknowledged that one of their sources was a Colonel N.H. Singh, who has now passed away, unfortunately. He himself was a subject of investigation for looting the slush fund.
Have you heard from any of the journalists? Have any of them phoned you up and discussed it with you subsequent to the stories coming out?
I haven't heard a word from Hofstadter or Africa.
And Ray Hartley?
Not a word.
And would you speak to them and would you have a conversation with them about it?
You know, Mandy, I've interacted with Africa and Hofstadter on various occasions. And they've struck me as people that cannot reason logically. But I'd still sit down with them and have a cup of tea with them. I don't bear grudges. I don't take comfort out of what's happening to them now. I'm not that type of person. But maybe one day they would sit down and at least themselves acknowledge the chaos that they created, and perhaps they'll share with openly who was behind it. I know they know, and I know who was behind it, and I told them that at the time.
And what is your current state of faith in the media? I mean, how do you feel about generally the state of media? Obviously in light of other stories, the Gupta leaks and other stories around state capture that have happened subsequently. Do you think this was one kind of grouping that failed, or how do you feel generally?
I don't think we should throw the baby out with the bathwater here. This is one incident, and I mean there have been others in the past. I think what's been our saving grace in this country is the independent judiciary that we have, the freedom of the media, and civil organisations. I think we need to laud those three. Of course, if it wasn't for the media, a lot of these issues would have just been covered up.
So I've spoken quite a lot about the fact that now is the time to rebuild the criminal justice system. Since the charges were dropped against Anwar Rabat and Shadrach Sibir, in the Cato Manor case, there's been the application to have the case struck from the roll, and then with Adrian Lakay at SARS, there was also the civil case that was dropped against him. And it feels as though there's been this shift now in the last couple of weeks, and what's happened with you at the Sunday Times. And we really need to rebuild all of these different law enforcement agencies that were eviscerated. How do we do that? Does that mean people like you going back, the rogue unit guys going back to SARS, and Shadrach Sibir going back to the Hawks? How do we rebuild what was lost and what was damaged?
Mandy, there's enough talent in the police, and I don't speak for SARS, but I would like to believe in SARS as well. But I can assure you there's enough talent within the prosecuting authority, all three of those organisations, to start afresh. But you cannot start afresh, especially with the National Prosecuting Authority, if you're sitting there with that same core of prosecutors who are actually, which I refer to as persecutors, they're not prosecutors. So unless they get rid of them, they can start afresh, and nothing is going to change.
And how important is it that the people that were pushed out go back? Will you go back?
You know, like Jacques Pau said to me, you want to go back and go and do your national service again. Man, I've done my time. I've done 40 years in the police. I think I played my part. I'm in the private sector now. I'm happy in the private sector. I engage with the police, I engage with the Hawks, I engage with General Rabia, I engage with the Minister. I collaborate with him, and where I can assist in advising, I do that. As a matter of fact, with the efforts of the Minister and the Hawks head now, we've drastically, and I must give the police the credit for that, brought down the cash and transit heist, especially in the Gauteng area.
Do you consider this chapter closed? Do you feel like it's finished, or do you feel like it's still a way to go?
No, we're not out of the woods yet. I will not be satisfied up until the time that there has been a complete clean-up. They've started with the Hawks, they've started with SARS. They now need to, I mean, they basically started with the NPA. But if you still have prosecutors like Moipona and Norka running the show in KZN, and the prosecutors that have been involved with all these malicious prosecutions, with them still being there, nothing is going to change. And the NPA is a very important institution in our country.
And how do we ensure that it doesn't happen again? because you spoke about the vigilance of civil society and the accountability. How do we as citizens ensure that we don't allow our institutions to be captured by a malicious cabal like it was in the past?
I wish I had the answer. And that's where I have to reiterate, freedom of the press, I think is probably one of those, the most important legs in exposing what's happening, because as long as they can hide what they're busy with, they'll continue with that. And I think the media has played a major role in exposing the rot.
And then just lastly, you intend to testify at the state capture inquiry. Is there anything that we can expect from you there that you haven't spoken about yet? And how much faith do you have in that process? Do you think that we should rather be seeing criminal prosecutions than a commission of inquiry?
Mandy, yes, I've been approached to testify, and I'm busy preparing to testify there. I don't think it would be appropriate for me now to divulge what I will be testifying about, but a lot of what I had been saying all along will form part of my testimony. And
you're satisfied with that structure?
Well, I think it would also be inappropriate of me to judge on that. I've got my full faith in the judge and the evidence leaders that are in charge of this inquiry.
We look forward to hearing what you have to say there as well. Thank you for coming in and chatting to us today, and for sharing your thoughts about the Sunday Times and their decision to apologise.
Thank you.